Okay, thank you so much for joining me again today. This will be our second class on this introduction to project management. It's just a comprehensive project management details for maybe immediate university graduate and as much as anybody along any career path who wants to pivot into project management or understand the basic tenets of project management. So I'm going to be sharing a lot of practical experience. Um, 2 Saturdays ago, we had a similar session like this, and I went through a couple of slides here. I'll be talking about traditional, hybrid, and the agile project management, which is like the more modern approach to project management, and the traditional being the older approach to project management. Both, when blended together at different level, becomes hybrid. Of course, to validate my credentials to be able to take this class, I'm PMP certified. That's Project Management Professional from Project Management Institute in the United States. And I've had years of experience working in the project field. So, to just jump in quickly, there are many credentials that you can have that could strengthen your credibility in project management. One of the key one is having a master's in business administration, which I'll recommend if anyone who is a graduate and you're interested in um, if you're in the healthcare, people will talk more about maybe a master's in public health, master's in healthcare administration, which is a blend of master's in public health and MBA. So just understanding that whichever path you take, either the public health, the health administration, business administration, you will go through the knowledge of and understanding of project management at one level or the other. So and if you are interested in certification, you want to consider project management professional, or you want to consider Scrum Master certification, or a Scrum maybe product owner and different other agile certifications that are available. Certified agile delivery expert. Those are different credentials. So today I will continue where I stopped the last time. I actually went through these 5 process groups, and I want to try to level set a little bit so that you can understand how the concept of project comes to be. So a project for a project manager, you just get pulled in into something that has already started as a problem from the business environment. I would explain again with the same example I used the other time. So imagine a bank, and I'm picking, let's say, GT Bank as an example. They are just deployed, they have an application that they're currently using. We'll call that application, let's say, Oracle. So they've been using Oracle and they deployed it in one of their branches in Ibadan, and Ibadan is in Nigeria. So they deployed it in Ibadan, and the team notices that after like 6 months, the response rate, or let me say the latency for the application to respond when you click, starts dragging, starts taking too long. And so they notice that when they click something, it takes like 5 seconds before a response is rendered to the screen. Gradually, as they move into a year, they discover that 5 seconds became 12 seconds, became 15 seconds. This is an identified problem on ground for a business. Now, a business system, the lady who is probably at the customer service desk of the bank in Ibadan, for example, will start complaining to our manager that the reason why I I have a lot of queue before me and I'm not able to make my customer happy, actually based on timeliness, is because my application is getting slower as the number of months increases. So that's an identified business problem. Now that problem they will start collating the problem from Ibadan to across the whole country and maybe anywhere GT Bank has branches globally. Now, when they collate all the problem, then it becomes like, okay, this is impacting 60% or 62% of our facilities across the world. And then the discussion will be, what can we do? Then they'll talk to the IT manager, IT director. And when they have that kind of conversation in maybe a strategic meeting, what will simply be discussed in such meeting will be, what can we do? How do we solve this problem? The next thing will be, okay, we've identified a problem. We need another IT platform, which will be more modern. So they could say they want to modernize their Oracle platform. Now, to modernize the Oracle platform, they would now send out what we call a request for proposal. They will need companies who have expertise in modernizing their IT platform to actually send in what we call a proposal. So they will send out what they call an RFP, a request for proposal. When the RFP is sent out, many companies will then send in their own proposal. Those proposals will be defended. Now, when they are getting to the final phase of proposal defense and they discover that, okay, we're going to select this company, that company would then start thinking at that point that I will need a new project manager. If they don't have someone in the pool before, they will say, I need a new project manager who would lead this project. That is where they start calling you in. That's where they start interviewing you. So someone will reach out to the HR of that company, that vendor company, and they will start reaching out. Now, GT Bank on the other side too could also have their own IT project manager dedicated to this project. So that's how opening comes when they need project manager. Both the sponsor company and the vendor company would need a project manager. Now we could call it different names. So for you on the call or listening to me, one thing you should understand is they could call it an agile project manager, a product delivery manager, a release train engineer. They could just give it different names, all in the bid to just package it based on whatever terminology they want to use. But the goal is that you're going to lead the project and you're going to lead the delivery until the product is handed over back to the operations team of the organization. So two opportunities of project management shows up when you have two companies who need themselves. You have a sponsor company who needs a vendor company who to help them develop an application, and once they sign the proposal and everything is sealed, we say they sign the statement of work. In most cases, they sign the SOW, which will be the statement of work. It will detail everything. In recent times, you will hear about, they will say it's a fixed bid project. That means the cost is already predetermined from the beginning, irrespective of what happens. I'm trying to go through all this phase because a lot of people just know about project management start with this initiation phase. But I want you to understand how projects start. The project is actually responsible for solving a problem for an organization. So when you're a project manager, you're a problem solver. You're actually there to resolve an organization's problem. So when they bring you in as a project management, they've identified the problem. They've identified that there's a team of people that needs to be followed up. There's something that has to be delivered. There's a solution that needs to be deployed. Maybe there is a program that needs to be run to relieve people of some pain, of some challenges. But what you don't know is they probably would have gotten fund for something. That's an example in the banking world. I could in 50 seconds talk about in healthcare space. In healthcare space, let's say myself, I'd written a letter to USAID used to be a popular name until it was shut down. But let's say I've written a letter to Global Funds now. I've submitted a proposal, or maybe they had reached out with an RFP as well, or they have an opening for a grant and I'd written to them and I'd gone through all the process of screening and the project is now awarded to my company. If the project gets awarded to my company, I also need to recruit a project manager. Global Fund needs to also have a project manager on their end. So that's why you would hear when they're talking about project management, they would say the project management from the sponsor side, and then you could have project management from the vendor side. One other thing that happens of late is You could have many vendors doing different parts of an application, building different parts of an application. You could have a vendor who will be in charge of database, another vendor of data pipeline and database. You could have another vendor who would be in charge of the front end and back end development. You could even have a vendor where in the development process, one vendor will be responsible for development, another vendor will be responsible for QA engineer, getting QA testing done. So this other vendor is only there for QA engineering. We only bring QA engineers onto the project. So you would have to be dealing with leaders across different projects, and each of these would have their own different project manager. So now, after establishing that knowledge, now you know how your job comes in. And that is why anytime you want to go for an interview for a project manager, your first goal is to understand what is the problem that this organization wants to solve. If you don't have clarity on it about it, either from the job application details, that should be your first question when you jump on the call. So when you jump on the call and after introducing yourself, you could say, please, I would appreciate if you could elaborate a little more about this project, about this job opening. Tell me what problem I'm being brought on board to solve. By the time you ask questions like that, it makes the person understand that this person knows his role. You are a problem solver. You're there to lead people to solve a problem. And you will need to have a whole knowledge of how the problem comes in. So for me, in most of my experiences, all I just hear is there's an intake meeting. When you hear them say you're going for an intake meeting, the meaning is that you're going to that meeting to go and understand what the problem is and what the tentative solution that had been thought about by the executive sponsors are. And your role in that intake meeting is to listen and jot down a lot. You're going to jot down, of course, they probably have given the project a name, and then you need to know stakeholders. You need to know stakeholders, and in the next slide, I'll talk more about that very soon. So your own role, classically, will go through this 5-process group. And I went through it the last time. You need to go through the initiation phase where you define the project, obtain authorization, get all their final approvals, and get to know all the stakeholders and come up with a project charter. The second part is planning. You would lead the planning effort. And that's why an excellent project manager would be the one who comes up with what the implementation roadmap should be like, based on all the understanding of what you do, what you know from initiating. And that's where your excellent understanding of Excel, Smartsheet, I'm listing those tools that you probably will need to use. Excel, Smartsheet, even Microsoft Suite, Word, PowerPoint, and Excel, right? Would really come in as a strong suit for you. And you're not only knowing Excel for just data imputing, you're knowing Excel for data analytics. You need to try as much as to push yourself beyond the basic knowledge of Excel. At least know how to create formulas in Excel. And of course, you know the Google version of Excel, which is the spreadsheet, which also works like Excel. You need to understand how to leverage those tools excellently well, because those are shared tools that everyone could work upon simultaneously anywhere they are, as long as they are given access to the tool. And the access level varies. There will be those who will just be viewer, there will be those who will be commenter, and there will be those who will be editor on the document. Now, the next thing is execution. Of course, the whole process of making the project happen, where you have to coordinate people, resources, and carry out what the plan had spelled out. This is when you do the real work. Now, in many cases, as a project manager, you might not exactly be the one. Okay, let me give an example, like an IT project now. I'm not exactly the one who will write the code, but I'm the one who will organize the developer with the QA tester, with the product owner, with any other maybe database engineer together, and ensure that everyone gets into the meeting every day, tells me what has happened on their project. We have different kinds of meetings that we get to do across the whole week. So I am not a core technical expert in terms of the writing the code. But one thing I must not miss is that I must be able to provide an update daily to senior leadership about what level we are. Because the usual question they would ask you during an interview is, do you know how to identify risk? Do you know how to identify dependencies? Please, and I hope if you're listening to me, you're jotting down, because these are crucial things that once you mention during an interview, it already shows you that you're different. So you need to understand how to identify. We call it RAID. I think I mentioned it the last class. You must understand risk. You must understand all the project assumptions. You must understand the interdependencies and the issues that has been identified. And those issues, you must be able to provide an update on what you're doing currently. So it's not for you to just say, um, we need data to be copied from maybe production down to lower environment. Lower environment means you're talking about development environment. Production environment is the higher environment. These are technical IT terms, right? So you need data copied from production environment to lower environment so that the team can use it for testing. Now, you don't just stop there, that's the problem. You must, as a project manager, tell them what you're exactly doing. Okay, I have reached out to the DBA team. They've given me a POC. That's a point of contact. The point of contact name is so. You must mention the name of the point of contact, and he had told me that he's working on it, and you must give the ETA, the estimated time that those things will be completed or arrive. So you would not only stop at and that's how you know excellent minded administrators or project managers from themselves. The one who will tell you the issue, will tell you what they're already doing on the issue. I'd sent out an email, I'd reached out in Teams, I'd created a group chat. You must tell everything you're doing to resolve the problem. And if you then need help, for some reason, because for some reason or the other you need some levels of approval that will probably be beyond you, you must tell them you have sent out an email. In most cases, you can ping them in Teams, you can drop a WhatsApp message, you can drop an SMS, but the official way where issues will be created will be that you have sent out an email. Now, in some very complex organization, they will say go and create a request ticket. These are technical terms that once you use during your interview, they already understand you have a good knowledge of the job. I create, and because you're the project manager, you're responsible for, even if you don't create the ticket, let's say it's the dev lead that created the ticket, it is your responsibility to follow up that ticket until it is fulfilled. So if anybody in your team creates a ticket, you tell them, please share the ticket number with me so that I can follow it up for fulfillment. And you would leverage your relationship, your network, to be able to make sure that the ticket is expedited. These are the core things you would do. So in the real sense, you're not writing the code, but you would automatically eventually understand the whole thing about the project. That's why I mentioned something the first time we met, that project management would force you to be a lifelong learner. You would have to be a lifelong learner. You do not, it's just the way to go. And it would force you to have understanding of to interact with everyone along the whole spectrum, both from the sponsor organization and from the vendor organization. Now, monitoring and control, it's also your responsibility to track, to review and regulate processes, create control, create changes. If a change is mandatorily required, like it's an obligation, then it's your responsibility to track it until the change is approved and you report back to the team so that they can incorporate the change. And for every change that happens, I'll tell you what it would alter as we go. Then it's your job to close a project. And I said something that day: closing does not necessarily mean the end of a project. Closing does not necessarily have to happen at the end of a project. Closing a project can happen anytime during this process groups. Closing can happen during initiation. There are some projects that jumped upon before, and at the beginning they said, we're no longer doing this again. It's now out of scope. And you will see me go into Jira and I'll put OOS on the ticket and push it out to done. It's now out of scope. So closing can happen at initiation. Closing sometimes can happen at planning. Closing can happen during execution, and if you have completed the execution and you have now completed the project officially, that can also be the normal closing, which everyone would have thought, right? But just to let you know that as a project manager, once the executive sponsor comes back and say, look, our priorities have changed, there's now a new policy in town now because there's a new tariff, there's a new government law, and I think I mentioned the PESTO analysis, the things that could affect project, politics, economics, socio-cultural issues, technology, legal, and environmental. PESTO, PESTLE. Political environment could change, power could change hands in that country, and things will just happen and your project will be shut down. It could be for economical reason. Maybe you had budgeted $1 million US, and for economic reason, you have a new president who came in and removed subsidy. And the next thing that happens is the price of $1 million project jumped up to $5 million. These are realities that would come to you classically, and you have to really be prepared for it. So and as you're taking interview, these are the things, technical details you need to put into your conversation as you speak. Now I want to create an excellent balance, because if you're an excellent project manager, you would also be an excellent administrator for your organization. But I want to put a little dichotomy, because for some of us, you might necessarily not jump into a project management role immediately when you want to join an organization. You may need to apply for an administrative role in an organization, and over time you will be tailored to become a project manager. I've seen that happen many times. And another thing that could even happen is that because your organization evolves rapidly or is evolving, we live in a rapidly evolving world, right? Because your organization is rapidly evolving, things can happen where even as a core administrator, you will still need to manage some project, or at least oversee the management. Oversee means there will be a project manager under you who would report to you. So in that case, the project manager will report to you. But if you don't know about project management, then it becomes difficult for you to even interact and set expectations clearly with that person, with whoever the project manager is. Now, for an administrator, what you are managing is the operations of the organization. Operations means just day-to-day activities in the organization that leads to the organization achieving its own goal. It's not usually a time-bound role. In project, the definition of project is actually an endeavor that you take upon that has a start time and an end time. It is expected that a project has a start date and an end date, at least theoretically. Some project may linger for so long, but it's expected as long as it's a project, it should have a start and an end date. And that's why I said even our life is a project. You coming into this world is a project, because you too have a start and an end date. And the world itself is the operations. The operations is always the continuous thing. So when you get into a bank, the people you meet working are actually the operations team. You necessarily might not have to deal with the project team. But when you see an organization coming to fix something in the bank, they are the project team. They will come in, fix a problem. They have a start date and an end date, and they leave. So as an administrator, you might have to interact with projects, and you need to also understand all this. Now, there are these 10 knowledge areas that, if you really want to be an excellent project manager, these are the 10 things that must run through your mind simultaneously. And just like I said, even as an administrator, this is also an excellent thing to understand, because the first work that is the work of a project manager is the integration management. And what are you managing on an integral level? The remaining 9 managements. I would like someone who is here who can unmute and speak to read out this 10. I just want to be sure you're with me.
Okay, we have the integration management,
Great. Go ahead.
scope management,
Great.
management, cost management, quality management, resource management, communication management, risk management, procurement management, and stakeholder management.
Excellent. Thank you so much for doing that. Now, your responsibility as a project manager is integration management. But the integration management means you would have to have an excellent blend of the remaining 9. And which one is the most important of this management? Can someone unmute and just pick a wide guess?
Stakeholder management.
Excellent. Why did you pick stakeholder management? Let me just have a feeler. Don't tell me it's just because the color is an orange.
Not at all. I think that stakeholder has to do with the people and the manager will be working with. I
Excellent.
guess.
Excellent. So stakeholder management is the most important. It is the most important, and it's very simple. Remember my story. Business operation has a problem. Executive sponsor allocated money, and they gave the project to your own organization, or you even belong to the executive sponsors organization, and your executive director every day will be asking you, what's the update, what's the status of this project. If the executive sponsor wakes up a certain morning and say we are shutting down this project, trust me, that project is gone. If anything happens and there is a rift between the leadership of your own vendor company and the leadership of the executive sponsors company, if there's a discord or a conflict and they are unable to resolve it, that project is gone. It's in jeopardy. Now, stakeholders, according to the definition of project management, is actually anyone who will be affected or impacted, anyone who is involved, affected or impacted by the project. So I want you to understand that the stakeholder does not also mean senior stakeholders, because what I've been using as an example is executive stakeholder. But don't forget that there is a young lady who was working at the customer service GT Bank Ibadan that I used as the initial example, whose system does not render response instantly. That lady automatically also becomes a stakeholder on that project, because whatever that project produces, she's going to be impacted or affected by it, either positively or negatively. Because while they are trying to develop a new application, the other application might have to be deprecated. And if they do that, what will simply happen is that our own job too would be impacted. She might even have more delays to even attend to customers. She may have to engage the customers and explain things to them. Several other issues like that could happen. So don't forget our RAID. You are there to identify risk ahead of time, manage all the assumptions of the project, identify issues, and also identify dependencies. What must happen before another thing must happen. Now, when we talk about a stakeholder, mostly we are always worried about what their interests are and what their value system is. And you want to know what their opinion also is. And the most important thing is you want to know what their authority is. Because you could jump on a call. So let me give you an example. There was one of this project I was leading. It was a big project. And one day I just noticed the vice president of the organization jumped on the call. And I noticed that, in fact, I didn't notice it was an online call. I didn't notice exactly what had happened. But what I noticed was, I just started noticing that the directors started talking in the meeting. They started chiming in, giving opinion. So I knew something was wrong. So I went to display the view of everyone on the call. And I saw that the VP was on the call. So everybody understands what authority is. Immediately I saw the VP on the call, I had to compose myself the more, even as a project manager. So what I'm saying is, you need to understand the authority of each stakeholder, and each person will speak based on their authority on the project. So before I wrap up such a call, courtesy demands that I ask if he has any closing remarks. Did you get what I said? Courtesy demand that you ask the most senior person on the call if they have any closing remarks, or if you can go ahead and round up the call if there's no remarks from them. That's part of the etiquette that you would probably need to learn along the line. So based on that, then you arrange it out. If the VP doesn't have anything, then you step down to, or maybe the CEO or something, then you step down to the directors, to the senior director, directors, and then until you come to people at, because for every project, the stakeholder matters a lot. Now, after removing the stakeholder, which of this other management is also very important? Can someone else take a wide guess? Of course, we all know integration management is managing everything. So I'll put integration management as number one. The next one is stakeholder management. Pick another one that is vital to the success of any project.
Resource management.
Quality management and resource management.
Good attempt, but not there yet. Pick another guess. What will connect two stakeholders together? Maybe I should help you. What will connect two stakeholders together? What always breaks down and leads to fight or conflict?
Communication management.
Who is that person? That's smart.
Communication management.
Excellent. So, as a project manager, your work is heavy on communication. So, when you want to sell yourself in an interview, this is one of the things you must speak to heavily. So, you provide daily reports to senior management, daily reports. And if you see that there's something that is a risk or is an issue, you ensure that you set up a meeting immediately. They may eventually not attend that meeting, but it's your responsibility to communicate that risk immediately and think about what the potential or what they need to do. At least let's jump on a call and discuss this risk. So I could even say because what keeps stakeholder management excellent is communications. In fact, it is said that the gateway to any organization is communication. So you live in a world where you cannot be weak in communicating. You can't get tired. You can't use, and that's why I have challenges with a generation that you will send something to and they will respond in one word. And you know what that one word can be sometimes? KK or OK. You will not excel in project management if you don't explain in details. Sometimes you will use some words and you have to put in bracket at the front of it what you meant by those words. Because communication would have to deal with the intent from your heart, the medium with which you're transmitting it, and what the other person would interpret it to mean. And until you're sure the person interprets well what you intended, your communication is not successful. So writing an email, you have to be clear, detailed, and as much as well formatted, cleanly arranged. And you must put space so that it can encourage readability. I had copied an update this Monday. I copied an update and I pasted it in Gmail. And I probably didn't pay attention to it well. I just sent out the mail. I was surprised the next morning when I saw my attention was called to that email the next morning. And I realized because I didn't arrange it properly, the way Gmail had rendered it to the recipient was more like a single paragraph. Everything was clumped together. I had to re-edit and resend the email, putting spaces in between every of my details. People will still accuse you. It's not that you didn't send the email. Don't get me wrong. They will still accuse you that the way you sent the mail affects or causes poor readability. Because of that, they didn't even pay attention to the mail. Everybody wants to put the blame on you as the project manager. Everybody. So it is your responsibility to ensure that you think ahead of everyone. Now, after stakeholder management and communications management, there are three other managements that the PMP had prioritized as the most important, and these are questions that even come out in PMP exam. There are three other management that are very vital to the success of a project. So I would like us to pick a wild guess now. At least the options are getting limited. So there are three other ones that work together. In fact, they call them a triangle. They call them a triangle because once you affect one, another will shift. I know you could Google, you could quickly Google now, you could do anything, but I just need you to pick a wide guess of, just to make it a little interactive, three other ones.
I'm guessing quality and cost because of what you said, working hand in hand, quality and cost management.
That's a fair try, but you're picking three. So give me three so that I will.
Okay, quality, cost, procurement.
Okay, you said quality, cost, and procurement.
And procurement
Who else?
management.
And procurement management. Who else wants to give it a shot?
Scope, schedule, and cost.
Okay, wow. Okay, scope, schedule, and cost. Okay. Any other person wants to give it a shot? One more person, and then we move. Okay, it looks like you already know the answer has been said. So it's scope, schedule, and cost. And they are a triangle.
Okay.
If you alter scope, scope is what exactly is the limit to the problem we want to solve. You can't solve all the problem a bank will have. Don't forget. That's why, as a project manager, you laugh when people expect a single president to come and solve a problem and solve a national problem. You can only solve, even when you say in petroleum, you can only solve a bit of the problem. If you say in agriculture, you can only solve something there. Okay, let's focus on rice. Even in focusing on rice, are we focusing on the planting of the rice, or we want to focus on processing the rice? And or we want to focus on marketing the rice? You can see that I've broken down even ordinary rice into many stages. And if you're not careful, you need to define those scope. Otherwise, you will run into what we call scope creep. CREEP. Scope creep. So you must manage the scope. At every time when someone now brings out, so let me take an example now. As a president who is the executive sponsor of this project, I've been called in to be the project manager to take care of primary healthcare centers across Nigeria. So if anybody brings in anything related to general hospital for me, should I accept it? General hospital is a secondary healthcare center, facility. So as a project manager, if anybody brings an issue related to general hospital, let's say Aurelia Gege or something, should I accept that thing?
No. It's outside your scope.
Well, thank you. So I should respond to the person clearly in an email, copying my own executive sponsor and his own, any other person he has copied in the email, to say, I am sorry, as much as this problem also affects you, the scope of our current project is what? Is limited to this hospital. I once did a project, and out of my own magnanimity, I went into a community that was not counted as part of the scope. I didn't know the scope was rural strictly, and they loosely defined what rural meant. Because they lose, and that's one of the reasons as a project manager you must get clear definition. So they loosely defined what rural meant. So I brought in a facility from another community which was not considered rural. I was presenting it in Lagos, Nigeria, and my attention was called to it that you had included a facility that was out of scope. I'm just giving you practical examples so that you can relate with what I'm talking about. So these are things that even sometimes you would have violated the rule, you don't even know. And your executive sponsor or your director will be the one to call your attention to it, that no, this cannot be part of it. Based on the definition of rural, this is what we considered rural when we were requesting for funds. So scope is very, very important. Schedule, you already know schedule means time. I hope you understand that. So once your scope changes, automatically your time will change. One other thing we do when we want to counterbalance a scope increase, which is approved by the leadership, is that you ask them, now that you are increasing the scope, the schedule may change. The only reason why schedule will not change is when you increase the cost. Why will you increase the cost? Because if you increase the cost, that's when I can get more resource to be able to achieve the new added scope. But immediately they change the scope, you must first tell them this is going to be a risk. Immediately they change the scope, you must tell them your procurement value will change. These are the key things, and that is why as a project manager, you're thinking about these 10 things as they're talking with you. So I can imagine you going to an interview. You will not be telling them specifically, I manage scope, I manage schedule, I manage cost. I don't expect you to do this by saying that in an interview. But what I would expect you to say is that on one of my projects, they added an additional scope. The scope went through a change control board and it was approved. Because of that, I knew we were going to encounter a risk, the risk of completing the project as scheduled. Now, to manage that risk, how to create a template or an additional SOW, that statement of work, which now includes the additional cost of the extra resource that will be needed. Extra resource could be human resource, could be machinery, like maybe a new computer, a new workstation, a new something. It could be material resource. It doesn't have to be human alone. The extra resources that we need. So I had to create a budget immediately and then I made sure I communicated with everyone. So you can see I sent out an email to everyone, requested for a meeting so that we could discuss and everyone would be in agreement. And from that meeting, we came up with an action plan table, which I am following up. So you're not actually saying all this management in verbatim, but you're actually telling a story that is connecting all of them together. But in your mind, you must have the picture of these 10 things. I am the integration manager. So because I'm the integration manager, I manage stakeholder, I manage scope, schedule, cost, quality, resource, communication, risk, and procurement. And that is the burden before you. Now, can I shock you a little? Looking at all this, don't you think everybody in the world should be a project manager?
Actually, I think everybody in the world at some point or the other has managed a project in their life. But you just
because your whole life
know it, how much of it they have managed here.
Excellent. So when they call you for an interview, you shouldn't say I've not done a project before, because even the art of going to the university, you may not know it. What you simply did was to be a project manager. You managed your life through school. Your stakeholders are your lecturer, the vice chancellor of your school, JAMB registrar, and your own colleagues, whoever you bought textbook, material, anybody from. They are all stakeholders in your journey. I remember the guy who used to do photocopying for us then. You have a soft copy of a PDF, you want to get it printed or photocopied. That's part of the stakeholder in our journey, either we like it or not. So even you're going to the school, even you're jumping on this training, and if you eventually jump on the full training, is actually project management. Because it will have a start date and an end date. The problem you want to solve now is you want to solve the problem of the knowledge gap in project management, and how you could apply it to interviews. How you could apply it in an interview so that you could you'll be able to communicate well, you'll be able to deliver during the interview and then scale and get a job. So you want to solve a problem of maybe getting a job, but you have to go through the process of interviewing. So you've been trained, you now understand what project management means. These are 10 knowledge areas that you must master for any project to be successful. But talk to me, even in your life, you must have a defined scope for what you want to solve. That is why you won't be able to go to 2 or 3 universities at the same time. You have to choose one for more efficiency. But you could decide to choose 2, but that means you have defined that your scope is 2. If you change the scope to 3, you are the one increasing the scope, but you must have a way to manage it. Because once you change the scope, what will happen is that risk starts flagging. What will happen is that resource will increase, schedule will increase, cost will increase, quality will be jeopardized. And that's why it is easier for people to go to one school and excel. If you combine 2 schools for them, quality will drop. So the interaction of these 3 impact quality directly. Now, I want to, because I know our time is closing in on us, I would like to wrap up with this matrix. If there's one thing I would love you to study or to know, please understand this matrix. You can just Google it. Project management, you can say PMP, process group and knowledge areas matrix. So Google will bring it for you. You have this image, but I will use it to explain a lot of things as we wrap up today. So looking at this concept, I want someone to tell me, what do you see? Now you can see this is a matrix of the 10 knowledge areas versus the 5 process groups. I'm sure you see that. Can someone just unmute and tell me, what do you see? Just feel free. Don't worry. Who wants to volunteer? Who wants to bell the card? What do you see here?
Okay, first noticeable on the matrix chart is that the integration management has been part of the entire framework from the initiation level to the closing level.
That's an
And not
excellent
at some point was
observation.
it ever absent.
Excellent observation. Good job. Any other things striking you? Because my job is to facilitate learning, and I want you to look intently and think out something. Those knowledge stays with you more than what I'm telling you, if you're able to reason it out. Any other thing strikes you that?
Yeah, the stakeholder management has also been part of it, but then they are missing at the final stage, the final process stage, which is the closing.
Okay.
And that's more like I don't know. It's not something I understand very well. I think it's more like a question on why and how are they missing out on the final part of the process.
Yeah, it's no longer indicated because it's believed that the project is wrapping up. You're just submitting presentations and everything, or maybe they've shut down the project, so there's no need to be responsible to any any stakeholder again. The project is ended.
Okay, okay, I get it now.
That's why it's not strongly indicated in that. But I get your point. It's a bit confusing because you'll be like, okay, what about if we now have to jump on a meeting to say, okay, we have wrapped up the project.
We have wrapped up the project.
How will I get my own balance of my money?
Yes, exactly.
I get your point.
How will you get your pay? Okay, so
that makes sense. But that's another excellent observation. But there's one that I'm actually waiting for.
Okay. Another observation, sir.
Yes.
Yeah, what is it called? All the stages I observe that they all go through the process of monitoring and controlling.
There's one very similar to it, and that's the most important one.
Planning, everything.
Excellent. Also. Every one of these knowledge areas requires planning. Let me tell you today, if you don't have plan in your life, you are not going anywhere. And if you don't put checks and balances in your life, that's monitoring and controlling. Even if you take a good step towards a great place, you can auto-destroy yourself. Every organization that is good, we have what we call systems and control. checks and balances. That's what they say in government, right? There's the executive, there's the legislative, and there's the judiciary. The three of them are supposed to check and balance themselves, except in some countries where one becomes so powerful and overrides the others. But if it's a standard democracy and not a monarchy, that is, even in monarchical system, I think there's a structure that still allows the chiefs or something. They might not be able to overrule the king, but they will still be able to manage the king to an extent. And they are the people who actually makes the kingmaker. So what I want you to observe keenly is planning is crucial to everything. And that is why, as a project manager, you must have a sound process for planning across all these knowledge areas. So you plan the scope. So if they put me on any project, one of the things I want to understand as I'm thinking through the whole integration process is, what's the scope? If you want to deliver an application, what would the application do? And what's the limit to which it will be doing it? Do you have a timeline in mind? When do we want to go live with this application? So if I say it's a 90-day project and we're starting on March 1, that means I already defined March 1 to May 31 as my closing 90-day project, or May 29 or 30 thereabout. And I said the budget we have on ground as approved by the leadership is $500,000, 90-day project. The scope is for us to build a dashboard. Then the next question you now ask me is, what are the features of those dashboards? Because those will determine what quality would be. So we need to plan for quality. We need to plan who are those we need to deliver in terms of the people, in terms of the process, in terms of the material, in terms of the machine that we will use. In fact, in terms of the methods, everything under resource that we need to plan. The next thing is, how do we plan communication? So there's something they call the RACI matrix. RACI matrix. Who has heard about it before? I'm waiting. RACI matrix. And this would also help you even in your personal life. RACI matrix. Okay, I'll go ahead and discuss it, because you need to, at least if there's something you need to take away from today's class, it's this RACI matrix. Look, in every project, there are people you are responsible to. There are people you are accountable to. There are people you must consult. And there are people you must keep informed. RACI, responsible, accountable, consulted or consult. You have to consult them, and you have to get information. You have to inform some people. So the people you're responsible to, that means as you're executing the task, they are the ones that monitors your deliverable. Maybe your immediate line manager, your executive sponsor. You're responsible to those people. In most cases, let's say I'm in a vendor organization, and it's the vendor organization that employed me. That means I am responsible to the leadership of that vendor organization. If my director calls me now and I say, where are you? I need you to do this, and drop everything on this thing for me in the next 30 minutes, that's exactly what you would do. That overrides whatever you're doing currently. Well, if you now think what you're doing currently is important, like let's say you're leading a client call, an executive sponsor call, you can let him know, I am currently in an executive sponsor call. I would only be able to deliver this in 1 hour. That's communication. If anything happens in 1 hour, you won't be able to meet up. You must still immediately open up a channel of communication, either in Teams, in email, in whatever way, to make him understand, due to this risk or this challenge, or because this stakeholder has more authority, I need to, because you might be in the same meeting and the executive sponsor, maybe a director from the executive sponsor company, will jump in and say, okay, Joshua, can you help me get the list of all the variables in the next 30 minutes, please? Can you drop in an email for me in the next 30 minutes? Remember that already impacts the other 30 minutes when your own director had called you. But because they are coming from the executive sponsor organization, they have higher authority because they are the ones paying your own company. And that is why when you jump on a project, you must know when you are the executive sponsor and when you are the vendor organization. If you are the vendor organization, customer excellence, because you're now managing, servicing a client. So customer excellence, everything must be at par with excellence, because you must understand that they determine the payments, the everything you can imagine. They can shut down the project. So, not to lose the focus on RSCI matrix, the person you're accountable to means ultimate answerable for results and decision authority. So, yeah, I'm responsible to my immediate line manager and maybe his own director. But there's an executive sponsor who might be the MD of the bank. I may not meet the person. There's a vice president of an organization, a leader, high-ranking leader that we are all accountable to make sure that and people like that usually have great authority to themselves. So they are not the people you want to delay in sending out what they had requested for. Now, consulting. In most projects, you have what we call subject matter expert. I would give you a very good example of a subject matter expert now. So remember I told you that there's a lady at GT Bank Ibadan branch who is in customer service. She's the one that is actually using the application. So in this case, if it is an application that we want to modernize and build a newer platform for, she automatically becomes a subject matter expert. Herself and probably her own immediate manager or leader or anyone that has worked extensively over the years on that application. The reason is that they have very clear knowledge of what the problem is. And they are the ones that will be able to interact with you and tell you that these are the challenges we face. This is what happens in real time. You may have 20 customers before you and you need to do this, do this, do this. So I need this application to be arranged in this sequence because that is the way my workflow tool would be. So you must always consult subject matter expert. And then who are those you just keep informed about the progress of the project? That is when you probably send out an email and you copy the president of the company, the chairman of the board, maybe any other interested person that has higher authority. In most cases, they are usually one-way communication because you won't expect that president to reply you back. If he wants to reply, he will call the executive director or the chairman of the board. Will not reply you as the project manager. He will just call, except there's something urgent that has to be flagged. And immediately that kind of person responds to that email. You see everybody running up and down. They will summon an emergency meeting immediately. In fact, you might be in another meeting. They will pull you out of that meeting immediately and pull you into a new meeting. And they start asking you questions. And that's why as a project manager, if you're going to be excellent, please ensure everything is documented. Please ensure everything is what? Just want to get a feedback. Documented. Ensure everything you do. If you go to a meeting and they mention some important things, write an email after that meeting, copy everybody and ask if they agree with what we have all agreed on. Don't just say 3 weeks ago I was in a meeting with this director and you said the next question everyone will ask you is where is it documented? This has saved me from so many problems. So I have this organization. The policy of our data policy is that after every 2 weeks, our message would disappear from Microsoft Teams. So you won't have reference to it again. And that's why please understand the policy of your organization as soon as you jump in. So anything you put in Teams that you discuss with your director, if problem does not come up in 2 weeks, and it comes up the third week, you cannot reference that as a document again. So you know what I do now? Or of course, I was lucky then, because after sending chat in Teams and everyone agreed, I took a screenshot of that Teams chat and I attached it to an email. I sent it to myself and I also copied my own director. About 4 months later, an issue erupted. I was summoned and I have the VP, everybody there. And immediately they pulled me in. That was the first question they asked. I immediately started searching for the email. But you know how emails can be elusive when you're under pressure. It took me a while to get it, but I had explained to them that this discussion happened in Teams chat and this was what we agreed upon. And the next thing, of course, I was expecting is, where was it documented? So I told them Teams chat had disappeared, but I remember taking a screenshot and copying. Immediately, my director got the email I sent. As I was speaking, I had not even found the email. She got it and she brought it up immediately in the call. And that was what saved the day. She was so happy. So it was an agreement by the other party, but for some reason, you won't be surprised. People can deny you. And they didn't mean it out of evil, because they also have some other overriding priorities and they want to push in additional scope for you. So because of their overriding priorities, they will try and find a way to push in new work item into the project you're doing. So I want you to know that, please, if there's one thing you need to take away again from this class and to speak to in an interview, apart from managing RAID that I had mentioned earlier, ensuring you know the RACI framework very well for communication excellence, also understand that documentation is a strong thing. It must be your strong suit. So you can't be saying, I am tired of typing, I don't want to update people. You must be willing to even communicate and tell them things ahead of time. Let it be that you over communicate than you under communicate. It is good to over communicate and keep spilling everything than for you not to. And please do it in something that is well archived, that you can retrace back even a year, 2 years, 3 years after. I've been on some project now that years later people still ask me about some document we created many years ago. But don't forget, even in the bid to do this, there are policies and procedures for doing it. You cannot send an organization's email to your own personal email. That is violation of policy. So even though you want to archive something, you must find an excellent way to archive it, so that you get a SharePoint access. You must make sure it remains within the organization's framework, please. Of course, you will later understand about data privacy, data protection, and all those things with time. The next thing is risk management. How do I present this? I remember telling you the first day that risk can be positive and or negative. So when they say risk, it doesn't mean it's negative. So we always have positive risk, which we call opportunities. Do you remember that? And we have the negative risk.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Remember that.
All right. And we have the negative risk, which is their threats. And don't forget, the definition of risk is not what is happening currently. Risk is something you identify ahead of time. Anything that is happening to you currently is no longer a risk, is an issue. Especially any negative thing happening to you currently is already an issue. So in an interview, I've been in an interview before, the person asked me to distinguish between risk and issues. Do you understand? So a risk is something you identify ahead of time. It could be positive or negative. An issue is something that is currently happening to the organization or to the project, and it's usually a negative thing. I hope that that difference is clear. A risk is something you identify ahead of time. It could be positive, which means an opportunity. It could be negative, which means a threat to the project. An issue is something that is already currently happening to you. That means you must have missed that risk You must have missed the identification of that risk, and it's now an issue. Or don't forget, when I discussed it the first time, you may not have missed it. Remember, I mentioned it clearly that there are 4 ways to deal with a risk. Who can remind us? 4 ways. 4 ways to deal with a risk. No, we're leaning in on time.
Okay, I remember you said you avoid the risk.
You can avoid the risk.
You can avoid the risk. You can mitigate the risk.
You can mitigate the risk too.
Yeah, you can. The third one is running away, but the last one was you bear the full impact of the risk.
But you're so sharp. Thank you so much. You can
manage the risk.
You can manage the risk.
Yes, managing the risk. Yes, thank you so much.
Excellent. You can avoid it, and you have people who likes avoiding problem in your neighborhood. You probably would have seen them. They will see problem and they say, no, until that problem now enters into their own house, they will now have to deal with the full impact of the risk. And that's why the excellent way is to find a way to manage it fully and eliminate it. Mitigating it becomes an option when complete elimination isn't possible by managing. Mitigation becomes a problem. But in some cases, really, too, you may have to look away because, let's say, don't let me use the example that came to mind is so funny, but and it can put a thing, and because this is being recorded, so you can, but it's not a good thing to avoid a risk. Let's just be clear. It should be one of the options you don't want to accept. So the last option is then you absorb the full impact of the risk. But as a project manager, what are you supposed to do when you know that you don't have a choice? You have to absorb the full impact. Then you start bracing yourself up to prepare for the full impact. I'm sure you've watched a movie before where maybe an aircraft wants to collide with something, or something is coming on. Maybe like what's this, Titanic, right? When the ship was about to collide with the iceberg. At that point, the next thing is to prepare for impact. Because even as they try to steer away, the rudder is not strong enough as at then to be able to steer easily. Unlike now when it's more digitalized and everything can happen as quickly as possible. So those are the ways you manage risk. And these are the key things that as a project manager, one of the things you should sell yourself as is you're an excellent communicator, you're an excellent risk manager, you're an excellent stakeholder manager, and you have an excellent knowledge of managing scope, schedule, and cost so as not to impact quality. Because ultimately, when quality drops, your customer is not satisfied, what gets to happen to you, even though you may have completed the project, but the project will not deliver as per quality. Your project will not deliver as per quality. So we are right on time at this point. Next week, I will be taking us through the concept of agile project management. You don't want to miss this. But what would happen next week is I would move this meeting by 1 hour. I have another meeting at exactly this time next week. So I'll move this meeting later into the afternoon more by 1 hour. So I will adjust the meeting schedule now in Zoom to accommodate for that, please. So, but next week we'll be talking about agile project management, and this is something you don't want to miss because this is now the modern form of project management. But the most important thing is it was good you have those understanding of the traditional project management, because the agile is now an iterative and incremental process that builds on your core knowledge of the project manager. So you hear people call themselves, I'm a scrum master, I'm an agile project manager, I'm a Kanban manager, all those things. If you hear things like that, I'm a delivery manager, all those roles as you see them. And I would make sure as I'm talking about it, I'll be heavy on the things that you must speak to during interviews, such that by the time you come for the full training with us, we will be able to take you excellently well on the whole details and Of course, you get certified by then as well, and then you be well prepared for taking on interviews. We will share with you interview opportunities that we see across the globe, anywhere where you are, and you have the legal status to work. We'll share you all those details, and then you'll be able to apply, and we'll support you through the interview process, and as much as you yield yourself. So that's the goal. I want to thank you so much for the interaction, and I hope that would continue to take it well from next time. Thank you so much for your time. Do we have any one question that I can answer in 1 minute before we wrap up? Let me go back to what we discussed today. Maybe that would help you bring up any question. But on this matrix board, if anyone had asked you what's the most important thing you should see, this integration management across all 5 process groups, and the fact that planning is important across all knowledge areas. Those are vital things that should strike you instantly. And that should tell you that your job as a project manager is heavy on planning. Now, I will contradict that statement a little when we get to Agile, and you will understand why. Because with Agile, we don't plan. Okay, I'll leave that till next week. Let this one settle in first. This is the traditional project management. We call it traditional or waterfall. So anywhere you hear about, I mentioned that the last time, if you can see my screen, waterfall or predictive project management or the traditional project management. And the characteristics is that there are sequential phases. It is detailed on planning. Now you can see why planning was checked across everything. It's detailed on planning and it's detailed on formal documentation. Heavy on documentation and heavy on change control, because things don't just change. Okay. Do we have any question in the chat, or anyone wants to unmute and ask a question before I wrap up? All right. Thank you so much for showing up. See you next week, but it won't be 2 to 3. It's probably be 3 to 4 next week. Thank you so much.
Okay,
Bye.
thank you very much, sir. As long as the time will be communicated to us ahead of time, we'll prepare.
All right. I would ensure that that's done. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you
you
very
so much
much,
for
sir.
having us.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.